Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the September 18th edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm your host, Colin Dowe, and let me first start by thanking you for joining us. Whether you're listening to GBN Radio, you're looking at us on GBN TV, or any of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Thank you for allowing us into your homes, whether it's living room, bedrooms, to your bars, in your cars, wherever you're listening to us. A warm thank you and welcome to this evening's edition of Beyond the Headlines. We are speaking about transformative youth strategies, broad theme this evening. And I will just ask my guests to introduce themselves. I'll give you another overview of the topic and probably a hint of a special surprise that'll be coming along as we start. I hand over to you for your introduction, name and portfolio, although you're a regular feature. Not your first appearance on Beyond the Headlines.
Certainly not.
And certainly you have been in the media recently.
Well, thank you very much, Colin. Thank you for having us on Beyond the Headlines tonight. David Andrew is the name. I'm currently the Minister for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening to bring to the nation's attention issues relating to youth and education as they unfold across the nation.
Excellent.
All right, thank you, Colin, and thank you for having us on the program. Orlando Amin, advisor to the Ministry of Economic Development and Planning with responsibility for ICT, and a pleasant good evening to all your viewing guests.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And I did promise that as the show progresses, we just may have a surprise during the course of the show. So you'll have to stay on because I'm not going to give you any more than we may have a surprise for you. But as we are to jump in, one of the things we're going to be speaking of essentially youth development strategies, broad sense. We're going to focus on education and skills development. We're going to focus as well on the creative economy in terms of the broad themes. But before we get into that, Minister, if you can just share, what is your vision for the Grenadian youth as you are in charge of this portfolio?
Right. Well, thank you. I think broadly, the vision I have for youth is to see a skilled population of young people, young persons who are ready to contribute, eager to work, with the correct set of attitudes, values that they can contribute meaningful to Grenada's development. So a skilled, ready to work, values-based group of young persons ready to contribute to our society's development.
Okay. And you have held the portfolio now, not quite for a year and a half, a year and a quarter. I
Yes.
believe you have been Minister for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture is the fullness of the portfolio. How have you engaged or your ministry, how has your ministry engaged the youth during this time?
Right. Well, I would probably limit the intervention. We have done stuff in sports, but the minister responsible for sports isn't here, so I probably don't want to jump on his parade too much. But certainly we've done a number of things in education with a hope. We've done a lot of skills among younger children. We've done the making access to education more readily available, so that the hope is that all of these will contribute to the ideal young person we want to see, one who is more skilled, more well-rounded and ready to contribute to the society's development. So we've been pursuing those vigorously in education.
Okay. Is it too soon, or can you share with us some of the interventions that you have made since taking over the portfolio that may have worked?
Right. Well, is it too soon? I think we're projecting, but clearly, let me start with, I don't know if I'm jumping your gun here, but I can go back to the expansion of TVET in primary schools, because we believe the earlier we begin to get the right mindsets into our young people, the easier the task becomes to shape them and to get the ideal young person and to get the vision that you want for young people. So we have expanded the access to skills education for in our primary schools, which we believe will translate into stronger uptake at the secondary level.
Share how this has been done, because the expansion, the introduction, as well as the sustainability of TVET has been a challenge,
yes,
even in the secondary schools.
Yes.
So how has your ministry gone about introducing TVET to the primary schools? What is the breadth in terms of the spread, or is it just a pilot project in a full school?
So let me say it was already there, but in a very small measure, and only some schools had access to it. And the model that was being used was a model where there was a center where you had equipment to facilitate exposure to technical education, and a limited number of schools got to access it, probably in fourth form, or not fourth form, but fourth grade or fifth grade, that kind of stuff. What we have done, when we say expansion, we've revised the structure to ensure that all primary schools, so it's not just 8 or 10 of them now, but all primary schools have access to a center where between the grades 4 to 6 have access to some kind of introduction to skills education. So it's no longer a case where, like, the center we have in Grenville only serving the 6 schools around, but we have different centers. We have in Woburn, we have in
what type of investment has this been? Because when we start talking skills, we're talking TVET, we're talking equipment. We can't sidestep that.
Yeah.
And if we're moving from one center servicing 6 to 8 schools to making it island-wide, there must have been some significant investment being made.
Well, the investment is still being spent, I tell you. I think what has worked in our favor in the introduction is that the resourcefulness of the TVET officers we have at the Ministry of Education, they've been able to use lots of substitutes. They're focusing on local material. So, and at that level, because it's introductory type, they don't need all this sophisticated state-of-the-art equipment and machinery that will bump up the cost significantly. Nonetheless, there was significant cost associated with it, and I can't quote the figure exactly, but I don't think it was cost that was insurmountable because of the strategy used. So what we really want to do is to make sure they get exposure to it, and so that they begin to see the possibilities that can exist without the stigma that traditionally has been associated with it the earlier we introduce it.
And well, we definitely will get to that. But let me just ask you this, and this is my more philosophical question. Have we been listening to our young people? Or is it those of us who are adults have been telling young people this is what's good for you? In other words, are we appropriately setting the stage for our youth to do things that they are interested in, and therefore the introductions of these new programs will be sustainable?
Well, we as an administration, we are certainly trying to do that. We are certainly trying to listen, but we know as a society we faced with this situation where persons are trying to dictate. I didn't get to be the doctor, so you have to. I didn't get to do this, so you must. This is no longer something that carries worth, so they don't want you to get into the skills, in the arts, in many of those areas. But as an administration, we are keenly aware that there are these non-traditional areas that pay a lot more than those of us who study in the purest sense of academia. That we spend our lifetimes trying to make what some people make in 1 or 2 projects when they go into some of these areas. And as a small economy, where we have comparative advantages in some key and small areas, we can't compete by size. We don't have the population. We don't have the land mass to compete with several of the other places. We don't have a wide range of natural resources. The gas and oil and gas has not yet been brought to the fore. But I think we do have some areas of comparative advantage. The oceans. Small island, big ocean states, and we haven't tapped into those. So we are carefully listening and trying to tailor our curricular packages to meet those needs and to make sure that our young people are appropriately skilled. And that, we believe, will allow for sustainability and developed interest in what we are putting forward.
Okay. You didn't mention it, but something that was new and newly introduced was the freeing up, as it were, of tertiary education by our national institutions. So TAMCC now being tuition free, the tuition free being extended likewise to NULO. What prompted this?
Well, this government, we are committed to, as far as possible, bring free education. We're not there yet. We are en route to getting that done because we believe fundamentally that one of the biggest transformational tools for our country is education. In fact, when we sat and prioritized health, education were among the top 2 priorities for us as a government. And so if that's among the priorities, we have to invest in it. We have to put our resources into it. We are keenly aware that if we don't put it up front for educational purposes, we'll have to spend it in the back for remediation and for curative purposes, probably in juvenile centers or in the prison service, and we don't want that. So we want to make sure that we put the resources there because it is important. It will help transform, it will lift our people from poverty.
Well, just expand on the expected outcomes of this free tuition initiative, TAMCC.
Right. Now, the reality is many persons just leave school at secondary level and they attempt to go into the workforce. They meet numerous challenges because they're not appropriately skilled. And the truth is, when you finish secondary school, the majority of persons don't have all of the work readiness skills. And so they're not appropriately skilled, and some people would say, we need you to have experience, or the workforce, the labor market will complain that we don't have persons who seem work ready. And so this free tuition policy allows the average Grenadian who ordinarily may not have had the opportunity, whose parents may have said, well, you have to go and try to find a work because I can't send you to college, I can't send you to NULO, I can't afford it. It's to allow the average Grenadian, the ordinary man, the poor, call them vulnerable, call them whatever you want, but to make sure that every Grenadian has increased access to higher learning. This makes them more work ready, better skilled, and better able to meet the demands of the labor market. And so that we know is going to bear significant fruit. It's going to reduce unemployment, and it's going to make many of our young people a lot more market ready. Okay.
Let me ask this, because in a former life, I had stewardship over one of those tertiary institutions.
Yes.
And my headache at that time would be meeting the operational cost. In saying no tuition for TAMCC and for NULO, how can we be assured that those institutions will be able to meet their budgetary requirements in order to function properly?
Well, I mean, the government has committed to meeting those costs. So it's a matter of the government ensuring that is done and paying the institutions in accordance with the number of students registered and duly verified. And that we are committed to doing. In this cycle, when we did all the crunching of the figures, we appropriated just about $2.5 million towards the meeting of tuition fees for the anticipated registrants to TAMCC and to NULO. We anticipate too that probably in the coming year it's likely to increase and improve as we've opened it to all persons who have not yet completed TAMCC or NULO. So I'm confident that we are going to be able to manage appropriately to find the budget and to sustainably provide.
Well, I'm going to ask you about the budget, but let me just, before I get into that, so you have some time to prepare where you're getting the money from. The question really is, alongside tuition, secondary schools is a classic example. Schools charge additional fees.
Right.
When we speak of free tuition, are we clear that's tuition, recognizing that the institution may have additional fees to assist with operational costs?
Yes. Well, I have had to make that clarification on a number of occasions, including in the Senate, when I made it clear it was simply tuition. Tuition is one charge, and in the case of TAMCC, the most significant charge. that persons would have to pay, and that $810 we are going to absorb. But there are some other charges that colleges and schools bring forward, and most times they're for some deliverable, something that they actually receive, whether it's your identification pin or your badge or your t-shirts or your tie. Those charges will still apply in the current construct. As to whether in future, as we move towards complete free education, all of that is absorbed, I'm not sure, because I believe for deliverables, there must always be something you can put forward for something you receive. And so there's always in my mind a place for that. But clearly the policy now, the free tuition policy, is simply for tuition, and it does not erase the other registration charges and identification pin charges.
Let me ask you, on 2 occasions you quoted $810.
Yes.
I'm familiar with that quotation for students within the natural sciences department, as well as those who have additional labs, etc.
Right.
Someone in the humanities may have been faced with a lower tuition charge, not having the labs, etc.
Right.
Is government's commitment $810 per head, or does it vary depending on department and school?
No, we've taken the policy $810 across the board, to the extent that when we looked at the tuition framework for NULO, the $810 was a bit above, but we were committed to making that available across the board to students both at TAMCC and to NULO once they're pursuing the programs there.
Okay, fine. So funds available?
Yes.
How have we budgeted? Because the economy has not expanded, when this commitment was made. So where is the allocation for the additional resources to the Ministry of Education coming from?
Well, I think more acutely the Minister of Finance will have to help you answer that. But we certainly did get it approved in the appropriation, because from the time we passed the first budget, we were clear that we were moving in that direction. But at that time, we couldn't reasonably put a figure to it, not having done the numbers, assessed how many students transition from secondary into TAMCC or NULO. So we had to spend the better part of the year, the last year, looking at the numbers, looking at the figures, and then we felt comfortable that this is what's within reach, what's within the means, and we were prepared to invest it there. One of the things I just want to point out, we spend a lot of money in several other areas, a lot more millions than 2.5, in several other areas, in several other programs that probably don't necessarily have the similar type of possibility and potential in it.
Well, you actually tempted me here, because I was about to bring in Kajana, but you preempted a question which was my next question, so I'm going to ask it. Are we going to see a reduction in enrollees in the Imani program by virtue of the free tuition at TAMCC, encouraging youth to go into college or NULO to improve their skills, as opposed to going into the Imani program?
Well, I'll be happy. Well, I anticipate that will be a natural outcome. It's not that we sat and said we are going to cut it. No. But I anticipate if the policy position that we currently have adopted rolls out the way we envisage it, there will be a natural reduction in the need for all of those apparently pockets of programs all over the place that take a lot of millions, and sometimes several years later you don't see what the value of it is. And so if this is followed, yeah, I think there will be a reduction somewhere down the road, but it's not an active decision that we've taken to cut it. Okay. But I anticipate it will happen.
I saw you in the news, Kajana, announcing new programs at TAMCC in support of the thrust for the creative economy. Just share with us what those programs are and the reason for those specific programs.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Yes, so the Office of Creative Affairs, in collaboration with TMI Community College, recently launched a pilot project or program where we introduce specialized courses for the creative sectors. This was a recommendation from the recently held Unleash conference. There was about 4 main recommendations, capacity building being one of them. And we felt that it was the appropriate time and there was the appropriate appetite amongst the young persons and those elder persons who are in the sector to introduce those courses where they can pretty much improve their capacity. We've introduced 2 courses for this semester. The first one is Introduction to Entertainment Law, and the second one is Entrepreneurship for Creative and Cultural Practitioners. Both are aimed to provide a sort of environment where creatives can understand the business aspect of what they do. Most creatives are quite technical and competent in their individual crafts, but when it comes to the business aspect of things, when it comes to the intellectual property and their rights, there is some deficiencies there. And so we felt that would be a good introduction point to ensure that we move creatives from being hobbyists to being business owners and to see the creative economy, which we call it, really start to take fruit. Because from the Ministry of Economic Development, our thrust is to ensure that we can see employment increase through that sector, we can see revenues increase through that sector. So we have a very economic driven focus on that sector. And so hence the choice for those 2 particular programs.
So those 2, what qualification are we looking at? So are these courses singular courses that would run for a semester or term? Are we speaking of an associate degree, some type of certification? What would be the terminal qualification?
So the courses currently, at the end of the courses, you do get a certificate. But next year we will be introducing a full associate's degree, and those courses, the credits on those courses can be transferred to that associate's degree. So we'll have a full associate's degree in cultural and creative industries. And it will be a series of courses, from the business courses to the actual practical courses to the legal courses, that will really equip creatives to really enter that workspace and be able to function at a high capacity in that workspace. So currently you get a certification, but if you do decide to take the full associate's degree, you can transfer those credits to the associate's degree.
Share what the associate degree will teach. Because if we're talking about creatives are in their crafts.
Right.
Taking on an associate degree would be associate degree in specific crafts, or would be the business of the creative industries?
Primarily the business of the creative industries.
Okay.
All right, but we will have, so we have somewhat assessed the type of training we need to provide the creatives, and they fall in three different areas. One, the business type course, or the supporting courses. It's not necessarily film or fashion or advertising as such, but it's courses that any creative would need to function adequately in the business environment. Then they have the actual courses that teach them the practical skills. We will be rolling out some of those shortly. And then we have the courses that will roll out for persons who are interested in more policy and macroeconomic planning around the creative sector. So we're looking at those 3 tiers of training to ensure that we do have the expertise on island who can help nurture the creative industry. We do have the expertise who can provide those business support services to the creative sector. And we do have highly trained creatives themselves who can produce the quality of work and products that we feel can survive in the creative
Just
space.
in terms of training, because faculty can sometimes be a challenge. As you think of the rollout of the associate degree, do we have people on island that can take on the responsibility of delivering the associate degree, or do we have to look outside? And when will we start this search? Because it's a new program. When will we start the search to have appropriate faculty to deliver at the level and get the type of outcomes that you envision?
And I'm glad you asked that question, and that's the reason we decided to take a sort of a phased approach to introducing the courses. So this semester will really allow us to assess the outcomes of those particular courses and where we need to pivot. We do believe for the associate's degree we have coming up that we do have adequate skill sets here to train persons. But when it comes to the individual skill sets like film and so forth, we will be looking at alternative means of getting those expertise on island, or whether it is we partner with other universities or colleges internationally to ensure that we do have a high level of experts to train our creatives.
Okay. And Minister, let me just bring it back in here. We have had this partnership with the Ministry of Economic Development with TAMCC. We have had the Ministry of Education saying we got these students in paying the $810 per head. We will also be seeing some other types of interventions in direct directing these institutions as to what type of courses and degrees they ought to be teaching in order to foster the development of our young people as envisioned by the administration?
Oh, certainly. In fact, we have already engaged the Council of TAMCC, for instance, with a view to having curriculum review, to look at the curriculum carefully. What's taught? It has to be relevant. We want to make sure all of the employment opportunities that exist can be duly filled by the programs that are offered at our premier tertiary level institution, post-secondary. And so that conversation has already started, and there are some cases where, in fact, part of our TVET strategy will see us rolling out a bit more of that, and where it's not captured in a TAMCC or a NULO type institution, it will be captured in another type, probably industry-related institution that's accredited, approved, and that's further down the road part of the conversation that we are going to adopt in relation to skills and to TVET type technical education across the nation. So yes, we are going to have a stronger direction in terms of what we recommend be included as part of the strategy going forward, in collaboration with the industry, so we don't miss it.
Now let me just ask you this. Have we developed a revised national training priorities listing that will be able to inform that direction that you'll be giving institutions? Has it been developed, one? And if it has been, or if it will it, again, naturally be in consultation with members of the industry, or in growth areas or emerging areas that we believe are pertinent to our economy?
Certainly the discussion has started. For instance, we've consulted with the Ministry of Labor to look at the current trends in work permit applications to determine what are employers applying for, which suggests the deficits that we have. We have been in consultation with TAMCC, NULO, about some of these areas. In our own reflection, we've determined, and our Prime Minister has always said it, there are some key areas that we have not formalized, the boat building, and so we have a current part of our plan to ensure that we have a Center for Marine Studies, and Carrico is being looked at for one of these areas where you have the natural skill of the boat building that has been preserved for decades. How do we formalize that and train persons to do that? And there are some other key areas, for instance,